Hi guys, this is Nadia from About Crafts, and today I want to show you how to create a simple little wire wrap pendant. I quite often do kits and PDF tutorials for some of the videos, so click on the shop link below to see if there's anything that you fancy. If you like to share what you make, you could join my Facebook group. I'll pop a link below as well. And yeah, that's it. So don't forget to subscribe to get all the latest videos. Right, let's get started. So to begin with, we're cutting 2 lengths of our wire, and we are going to find the midpoint of this, and then we're going to cut a small section of our half round wire, and I'm going to bind this, bind the 2 wires together. Now the reason why I like using half round for that is you could obviously use round as well, but the half round sits nice and flat against the square wire, so it binds it much better. You could also use, obviously, instead of the square wire, use round, but it just grips much better, as you can see here. So once we've wrapped the bottom section in the midpoint, we're going to trim off the wires, and make sure you trim these wires off right inside and not on the outside of the pendant to avoid snagging. So the next step is to bend these 2 wires in the middle. So just grab a pair of pliers and bend these in the middle. So this is quite a thick wire because the stone is quite big. If you find it difficult to work with, you can also use thinner wire like your 1mm, which is 18 gauge or so. That'll work as well, but obviously it'll be a little bit more flimsy. I've used quite thick wire, which is the 16 gauge, because the stone is quite big. So, but you don't have to use that thicker wire. So next we're going to shape the wires around the stone, which is always a little bit tricky, I find, when you use the stone upside down like that. It's much easier when the point actually sits in the sort of V shape at the bottom. So it may be slightly fiddly. And a little trick I have there is you can place the shape onto a hard surface and shape it around the stone. I'll show you in a moment. But the next step is to wrap around each side with some half round wire. This is just to bind the 2 wires together and make it a little bit more sturdy. So we're going to trim off, and remember to trim them off on the inside. So next, check that your stone fits. We're going to then shape it. So I was talking about a hard surface. I'm bringing in my block, and I'm making sure that everything is central, and then I'm going to bend the wires and using the stone as the shape, if that makes sense. And I'm squeezing these wires together like so, and this helps me to shape the wire to the shape of the stone. Bring a tool and press the 2 wires at the top of the forerather together, and this will give it a really good tight fit. So that's what it looks like. And then next we're obviously going to create the bail. So I'm cutting my half round again, and I'm binding one side to well, the tail, small little tail, to one side, so that I have an anchor. And then I'm going to take the remainder of the wire, and I'm going to shape this around the bail. So everybody has slightly different techniques on how they do their bail. Some like to go clockwise, some like to go anti-clockwise. You just play around a little bit and see what works for you. So we're going to do just a couple of wraps, maybe 3 or 4. So keep twisting until we've done, I think I've done 5 here, something like that. And then we're going to bend out the 2 wires at the front. So I'm just going to double check everything still fits. That's fine. And then the 2 front wires get bent out of the way, like so. And then we're going to create the rest of the bail. We're going to use the 2 back wires to continue the bail. So the wires that are sticking out are going to be the front of the pendant. We're going to use these to create the detail. So next we're just going to wind half round wire around the 2 squares, and again just do it whichever way you find most comfortable. So again, the bail length doesn't really matter. I think mine is about 2 or 3 centimeters. You can do this to suit whatever look you want. It's not important, it's not very structural at this point, just visual, so decide what length you want. And then what we're going to do is bend the legs of the bail slightly upwards, and this is so that when we fold the bail backwards, these 2 wires will then sit parallel to the frame, and it also gives the pendant a sort of central point to hang from. If it's too far back, the pendant will kind of hang lopsided. I don't really know how to describe it, but you'll see what I mean. If you do the bail too far back or too far forward, the pendant doesn't sit right. So we've bent these in shape, and again check the stone. It sits nicely, so happy with that. Check from the back. And then next I'm going to take a pair of pliers. Now obviously, this being thicker wire, it's much more difficult to manipulate than if you were to use, say, you 1 millimeter, which is 18 gauge, or you 0.8, which is 20 gauge. So be careful when you're bending these. Take your time with that, and have a good pair of pliers to make sure that they're thick enough so that you're bending them out and they sit the right way. So we're going to do this to each open corner in between the bindings, the half round bindings, and that will kind of create like a platform for the stone to sit in. So we're going to do the same on the other side. As I said, if you were to use, for smaller stones, you can use smaller wires. So for a 20 millimeter stone, you could use a 0.8 or 1 mil wire, and it'll be much easier to create the shape than it would be with the 1.3 mil, which is quite thick. So, but it gives you a lot more structural integrity, and you don't really need to bind the decorative wires because the wire is so strong it holds the stone in place. So check your stone again, and that's all good. So next, I'm going to cut a piece of wire, half round wire off, and now we're going to shape these wires. So this is the backing, and now I'm going to create more detail at the back. So I'm bending these legs outwards, and this is going to become an extra backing. It's not really necessary because you have enough of a backing already, but I think it's more for visual detail because this frame doesn't really have any weaving. So the more detail you can add with the wires available, I think the nicer it looks. So we're going to just use these wires as an added visual detail on the back. So you're going to make a nice diamond shape, and you can create any sort of shape you like, but I find this one suits it best. So create a little diamond and just make sure that the sides are symmetrical. And this wire is quite forgiving, especially when you're using the dead soft. I never use the half hard. I just don't like working with it, but everybody's different. There will be some people that really like it. I prefer to use the dead soft. So next we're going to bend the wires at the bottom. So we're going to bend these towards the outside of the pendant. And what we're going to do, these legs at the bottom are just going to be attached to the frame. And that way this is nice and sturdy. And obviously just make sure it's all symmetrical. So next we're going to bind these legs together just like we did with the outside of the frame. trim the bits and pieces off, and that's what it looks like so far. So next I'm going to take these legs, and obviously again 1.3mm is difficult to manipulate, so just kind of tease it around the frame with a pair of pliers using the loop. So if you grab onto the loop rather than pulling the wire at the tip like I'm doing here, you have a little bit more leverage when you have thicker wires like that. And then always squeeze. You can control where the wire sits by squeezing the loop rather than pulling at the tail end, if that makes any sense. There we go. So that's one attached, and then you can kind of tighten up that loop a little bit further. Then we're going to do the same on the other side. So feed the wire through using a pair of pliers, and rather, as I said, rather than pulling the tip of the wire, just kind of use the loop to feed it through, which will also prevent the wire from work hardening, because you're not manipulating the whole wire, just, you know, in areas necessary. So that's what it looks like. So the stone still fits. So next we're going to create this sort of swirly bits. So this is a very organic design, so it's entirely up to you what you'd like to do. I started by feeding the wire through the bale. So I'm bringing it through here, and the reason I did this is to bring up the wire a little bit higher than the one on the left. So I'm teasing it through. Again, the wire is quite thick, so it takes a little bit of manipulation to get it through. So bring it through, and then it allows me to go in an anti-clockwise motion. You always follow where the wire wants to naturally go. I find then it's much easier to work with. So next I'm going to go into the opposing direction, but again, this is entirely up to you. I just find it looks nicer when you go clockwise, anti-clockwise, clockwise, anti-clockwise, but everybody has got their own sort of style. It's just what I do. You can find your own sort of pattern with that, so just play around a little bit. What I recommend you may do is, before you use the thicker wires from the bale, maybe attach a piece of, let's say, 0.8 20 gauge wire to the bale and practice a little bit before using the actual wires from the bale. And that way, if you don't like the result, you can, you know, repeat it with a different piece of practice wire before ruining the nice wires, if that makes any sense. I find it's quite helpful if you haven't done this style before, to help you, you know, get a feel for how the wire behaves when you're doing this. So once that's done, I'm going to put the stone in, and we're going to double check everything fits. I'm quite happy with that. So next we're going to attach the end of the wire to the frame at the bottom here, and I'm running out of wire a little bit, so I've only got one wrap, which doesn't really matter much because, as I said, it's quite a thick wire, and this isn't going anywhere, so that's plenty. And it sits quite nicely. If you were using thinner wire, you would have to use a piece of 0.4, which is 26 gauge, to tie down the swirls to the frame. But as I said earlier, this wire is quite thick, so it stays in place. So now we're going to repeat what we've done on the other side as well. So again, we're going clockwise and then anti-clockwise, and just wherever you feel there should be a little swirl, you can put one. So bring it round, and then we're going to attach. So we've got little loops attached, and we're going to now feed the end through the little gap at the bottom. So I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to bend this into shape a little bit, makes it easier to bring it through. And then I'm going to just feed it through like I did with the other side, and I'm going to attach this to the frame as well. There you go. Feed it through, and then just wrap it around and squeeze it shut. It takes a little bit of manipulation sometimes, and that's why I like my bent nose pliers. I didn't have them handy at this stage, but for purposes like this where, you know, the pliers are hard, normal pliers are hard to reach with, bent nose pliers are fantastic because you still got the access and you don't have to be a contortionist to get your wires into these areas. So I just couldn't find them at this point, but they're handy for that. So that's what it looks like. So nice and attached, and everything is in place and the stone doesn't go anywhere. So next I'm going to create a little swirl. Now this is again optional, you don't have to do this. I just thought it fits the design. So the way to do it is to squeeze the end of the wire. So what I do is, as I squeeze the wire, I kind of roll at the same time, and what that does is it thins out. It tapers the end of the wire so that it's almost like you filed the end to a point, and it really creates a much more finished look to the piece when you have it like that, rather than having a thick cut end to it. So if you squeeze the end of the wire, you get a nice fine tip like that. And next we're going to hammer this. So depending whether you want texture or not, you have to decide where you want to hammer. We're going to twist this at a later stage. It doesn't really matter where you hammer at the moment, so I'm just going to go with the front, and using the sort of the ball side of the hammer gives the wire a little indent. And to get the flare of the swirl, I kind of hammer into the direction I want the wire to expand, if that makes sense. So don't just hammer the wire anywhere, just kind of focus on the areas where you want the wire to expand and kind of direct the blows into that direction. I hope it makes sense. And then we're going to rearrange. The hammering kind of distorts, so you need to rearrange the swirls a little bit. And I've twisted the wires, and now I'm going to place. A twist isn't necessary, but with the square, I think it gives it a nice little touch. So I thought I do this with one of the swirls, and then we're going to arrange it against the stone. Next we're going to do exactly the same on the other side. So again, squeeze the ends, so give it a little bit of a squeeze, and the round nose pliers are great for that. And as you see, as I squeeze, I twist, and this kind of teases the wire to a fine point. And this works well with any wire, but especially with your dead soft. As I said, I don't often work with your half hard, so I don't really know how this wire would behave, but it works very well with your dead soft. So then you kind of tease the swirl into place. That's what it looks like. So once again, we're going to hammer. So again, decide which side you want to have the detail on. As I said, if you're using the round part, you get indentations. Now I would recommend here at this point to get a domed chasing hammer. You can see here that my chasing hammer has a dome on the sort of flared part, and the reason for that is if you have a flat hammer with no dome, it marks the wire more. The dome kind of prevents the edge of the hammer to put markings on the wire, if that makes sense. There are some on eBay. I haven't actually looked for a while, so I need to check and see if I can find a link for you. But yeah, if you can, go and find a dome chasing hammer, because it makes a big difference. So you can see me here getting quite violent, trying to hammer into the direction that I want it to be. That's what it looks like. So now we're going to press this in place, and you can put this wherever you like, and then adjust. Remember to adjust, because the wire obviously gets bent out of shape. That's what it looks like so far. So last bit is to actually add your beads. Now again, this is obviously dependent on how you've created your swirls. I've just placed beads all over the design wherever I felt it was a good fit. So I'm going to go all around the design and then place them wherever I think they look nice. So that's what I've done here, and the last step is to obviously trim off your weaving wire that added the beads, and that's what it looks like. So here's a little setting which is called the lollipop setting or quilt setting. There's a video. I haven't included this in this tutorial because there is a video for it on my channel. I'll pop a link below this video that will show you how to create this setting. If you're not comfortable to create this setting, you can use a drilled bead instead. So it doesn't actually have to be, you know, a coiled setting or anything like that. So if it's too difficult and you don't really want to create this, use a bead instead. It will give you a similar look. That's just what I like using. It looks quite nice, I think, to use these sort of coiled settings. So that's that. So that's the whole pendant done. Obviously now trim off all the extra wires, and that's it. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to see you make, so pop it into our artist group, which is on Facebook. I've popped a link below. Don't forget to visit me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Everything is found under Imbali Crafts. I would absolutely love to have you. And yeah, obviously don't forget to check out my Etsy shop or my website for PDF tutorials, to buy art, and all sorts of other nice things. So yeah, that's that. Hit the subscribe button because I upload videos all the time. So thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.